Welcome to Liminal Radio, a niche horror podcast. I'm Gray.
And I'm Hatter, and we're going to take you further into the Lovecraft rabbit hole with Lovecraft and other media.
And today we're specifically going to be looking at his bestiary, just like we did last episode, or our last Lovecraft episode anyway. And we're going to be looking at the bestiary and how the different creatures, monsters, and entities of Lovecraft show up in other fiction and inspire other fiction.
And we got quite a big list here. And of course, first on the list, just like last time, and arguably one of the most represented beings in Lovecraft. Who is it, Gray?
It's Cthulhu. And as we've said before, it can be pronounced a lot of ways. Cthulhu, Shathulu, and supposedly, according to the way Lovecraft said it, was Kuhulu, which I think is the weirdest one, but Lovecraft was weird, so there you go.
Don't forget Stephen.
Really Hatter.
Really Hatter. But yeah, Cthulhu, or however you want to say it, I'm just going to call him Steve. Steve has appeared in many forms of media, and we're going to see a recurring pattern here with this first one. Of course he was in the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, which Gray has yet to see, right?
I still have yet to see it. I'm going to make sure to watch it, and we will have an entire episode after I watch the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy where we just nerd out about it, because I am sure that a lot of our followers are also fans of the show. And if you're not, you probably should watch it like I do. And heck, you can watch it getting ready for our episode and then enjoy our episode as a, brand new appreciator just like me.
So the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy has a history of just having horror characters referenced and straight up shown that kids the age group that the show was intended for probably wouldn't get. But it's going to be a recurring theme. We can talk more about it as we keep going. What do we have next?
Well, one of the things I want to talk about is the fact that this is going to be a recurring theme with all the bestiary creatures we're talking about, and that's that they're often confused, meshed together, and kind of represented in weird ways. Like, for instance, when we see Cthulhu being represented, a lot of times he is getting mixed up with the great old ones or the outer gods. So often we'll see Cthulhu in a more accurate representation, actually like in Billy and Mandy, was not an inaccurate representation of Cthulhu, a cartoonified version, but not an incredibly inaccurate one, where he has, of course, and for anyone who may not be familiar, in Lovecraft, he is, insofar as he has a physical form, which that's always up for debate, but we do see statues of him and kind of what he is, quote unquote, supposed to look like, which is huge, hunched humanoid body, basically squid head with tentacles on his face and dragon-like wings. So we see that representation in quite a few places, but we also see other places where it is definitely coded to be Cthulhu, but it's more just giant space squid, giant other reality squid kind of creature, and often kind of mixed in with the representations of the old gods and the outer gods, who we will also discuss their representation. So that's worth mentioning that a lot of these are just sort of generic squid entity, but they are often coded as Cthulhu.
Yeah, he's making prank calls in the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, which is pretty funny in and of itself. But again, more on that once Gray has watched it. I think we'll probably end up doing a couple episodes on that show. But yeah, we're going to talk about it quite a few times. Now, next on the list, you're going to know this better than me because I haven't seen it. But we are going to talk more about Billy and Mandy, not only in future episodes, but in this list. Believe me, it's a recurring theme. But next on the list, I haven't seen this one. This is one that Gray knows, is Underwater.
For those who may not be familiar with Underwater, it is a sci-fi movie featuring Kristen Stewart, which we'll try not to hold that against her, because while Twilight was what Twilight was and definitely gave her a bad reputation as an actress, I actually think she's a pretty decent actress when given the opportunity to, act. And she's not half bad in that movie. And at first, it definitely comes across as just a generic, we're underwater in a research facility, bad things start happening. But then slowly, like, these smaller squid creatures start attacking. And the big reveal at the end is that there is a giant entity outside of the facility that is trying to rise and destroy the world, and it's Cthulhu. So sort of the big reveal is that this thing that felt very science fiction is actually cosmic horror and almost literally Cthulhu, including, like, you see its face. It is basically the Cthulhu squid face. So, I mean, it is very explicitly Cthulhu is about to rise if we don't stop him is the big reveal at the end of the movie. So while I don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's the greatest movie of all time or anything like that. It's definitely an interesting twist where we start off with a sci-fi movie and end with Lovecraft, and it's a pretty cool journey you go on.
Yeah, I will say there's no way she could be much worse than she was in Twilight. I still need to watch the movie. I guess at some point I'll try to watch it. I'm going to say this, though. They kept that reveal pretty well hidden because even I didn't know about it till we talked about it.
Well, you know, there is an entire, I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but there is an entire subject we could talk about in horror movies where there is a balance between not giving away your amazing twist and that preventing you from encouraging people who want to see your movie to see your movie. I could come up, actually, Hatter, we should do this as a list of movies that if you don't know the twist, you won't go see the movie, but the movie is so much better if you don't know the twist.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 situation. Definitely something to talk about in the future. But yeah, underwater. You got Cthulhu under there. That's what's happening.
So now we're going to move on to one that Hatter is going to be our expert on. So Hatter, tell us about Dark Corners of the Earth and how Cthulhu's represented in that.
So Dark Corners of the Earth was a video game on the Xbox. I want to say it was on PS2 as well, but I don't think so. And the whole idea is it's just a bunch of Lovecraft stories kind of mooshed together. You start off in Innsmouth trying to escape, and throughout, your main character has gained knowledge that he does not wish to have. And yeah, Cthulhu is represented accurately in this one. You never really see him, and when you see any kind of statue or any kind of representation of him, this is probably the first game with a sanity meter, or one of the early ones at least. You start to lose your sanity, and things kind of go crazy. It's like, you don't understand what Cthulhu is in this game, and that means to me that they did it very well. Now, there's a few things like, you know, you have the main character shooting deep ones and stuff like that. You have to have some degree of combat in a game like that. Well, back in the day, you did. They've done it differently, and we'll talk more about that in the future of the episode. But at the end of the day, they did it very well. It had a great atmosphere to it. The whole episode, the whole game starts off with the main character in Future Sight hanging himself. So you know it's a good Lovecraft game, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A character not being able to deal with the horrors of what they saw and it ultimately having a fatalistic vibe is so incredibly Lovecraft. Later at some point, we're going to mention the TTRPG Call of Cthulhu, which is a fantastic tabletop role-playing game. For those not familiar with TTRPGs, they're a bit like Dungeons and Dragons. This is just the Lovecraft one. But we're not going to go deeply into it. The only reason I will mention it is because it, of course, like any TTRPG, has skills, and it describes the skills. And it talks about the firearm skill. And one of the things that if you read its description of the firearm skill is that this skill will allow you to use firearms. Mostly, this is not going to be especially useful to you because in the setting of cosmic horror, the best use of a firearm is going to be to use it on yourself to end the madness. This is in the TTRPG book.
Yeah, and further fun facts about Dark Corners of the Earth. It is actually in part made by the creators of the TTRPG. It is in their version of the universe, and Chaosium's the creators of it. Their sticker is on the game,
which is awesome.
But yeah, there's not much more to say about it. It got everything right. It did everything it could do right in a 2000s game. I give it my official Hatter seal of approval.
Which is a very high bar, so that's amazing. And there are some other games that we'll mention as we talk about the different bestiary creatures that are being mentioned. So there are there's a weirdly pretty good catalog of Lovecraftian-inspired games. But we'll go ahead and move on to another video game and talk about the representation of Cthulhu in Doom, which Doom is, of course, one of the 2 or 3, depending on how you count it, original first-person shooters.
Yeah, there were actually 3 initial Doom games. There was Doom, Doom 2, Doom 64. Then there was Doom 3, which doesn't count. And then they made the new Doom games. They have 3 of them so far. And in one of them, I want to say that it was Doom Eternal. You fight a boss that is basically Cthulhu. It's a giant squid-headed thing. I wouldn't say it was very well represented in concept, but the fight's cool.
Well, and that's one of the things we will see a whole bunch of in this is that the entities from Lovecraft definitely inspire other characters, but they're not necessarily going to be really accurate accurate. They're going, because they are not necessarily interpretations, they are inspired representations. So I do think we're going to have a lot of not being exactly what they were in Lovecraft, but they're going to be inspiring something really cool. One thing I will say about Doom is essentially heavy metal music, the video game.
Oh yeah, and the soundtrack was exactly that too. But Doom, I was talking with you about this the other day. Don't worry, I'll keep this quick. But yeah, no Doom game after three and after, I feel, has captured what the original Doom was. It's kind of the opposite of Lovecraft. Whereas in Lovecraft, you're dropped into a world, you're probably already going to die, everything sucks. With Doom, it's like, okay, here is gun. There are people who want you dead. Not really people, monsters, but whatever. Use gun to stop them and get to exit. And that's so opposing to Lovecraft because it gives you all the power. Like, you're taking down armies of enemies. So again, the Cthulhu in Doom is not a good representation. It's still cool that he was there. But the thing is, and I'm just going to go real quick on this when it comes to other media, Lovecraftian beings do not, for the most part, translate well to film or games because there is an inherent, especially in games, there is an inherent idea that it's a power fantasy, that you want to be the one getting through to the end and just, wrecking everything and being the hero. That's not how Lovecraft works. There are games that did that right. But I got to tell you, as much as I love Lovecraft, games like Amnesia, I don't like them. I don't like feeling helpless in a game. I want to be powerful.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, there is a huge community that loves their survival horror video games. And survival horror is a really popular genre. I'm with you. I hate it. I can't stand it. Haunting Ground was a really good one that I thought was an excellent example of a survival horror. Hated it, couldn't stand it. Plenty of other really fantastic survival horrors, and I don't enjoy playing them, which is funny because I do enjoy reading Lovecraft, which just goes back to what you say. For me, and for a lot of video game players, we want our power fantasy in video games, whereas by definition, survival horror, which is a pretty good representation of cosmic horror, does not give you that power fantasy, so it's not super compatible with those expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, the one kind of exception, I like Resident Evil because it found a good balance. Like, it makes you work with what you've got, but you still feel powerful because you're getting through these things with limited resources. I feel like games like Amnesia kind of went off the deep end with that. Like, oh, you can't even fight. These things will kill you if they get anywhere near you. You have to hide. I'm like, I don't want to hide. If it was real life, I'd probably die, but I'd try to knock the thing out. But this is actually a great discussion for another episode. I really think we should do an episode on how horror works in video games. But we don't want to get too deep into that here. We got stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, I'm going to do something very dangerous, and I'm going to unleash Hatter on music, but I'm going to tell him to keep it very brief. So, Hatter, go ahead. Give us the Cliff Notes version because, guys, he could go all night on this, and it would be amazing. It would be entertaining, but we don't have all night. So, Hatter, give us the Cliff Notes version of all the representations of Cthulhu in music.
See, first of all, we're going to talk about Metallica, so you don't even realize it, but by saying Cliff's Notes, you did a fantastic pun there. Rest in peace, Cliff Burton. But we're going to start with Metallica. Now, Metallica, we talked about this briefly in the previous episode, had 4 Lovecraft songs in their library. They started with Call of Cthulhu. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what that's about.
I bet I could get it in 2.
Probably. And then we had The Thing That Should Not Be a few albums. Wait, hold on. On the next album, we had The Thing That Should Not Be, which to me kind of seemed like them saying, okay, so we did the Lovecraft song that was an instrumental. Let's do one with actual lyrics. So they did The Thing That Should Not Be. Fun fact that somewhere in there it's about Cthulhu and they call him the Crawling Chaos. Yeah, kind of messed that up a bit, but it's fine. Not a big deal. The next one they did, this was decades later. This was way later on. They decided to do another one, and they tried a different entity. They did the Hounds of Tindalos. This was All Nightmare Long, and the main lyric is, we hunt you down without mercy, hunt you down all night, Hounds of Tindalos. And then on the next album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, they do another song called Dream No More. And I'm like, somebody tells me, oh, it's a Lovecraft song. You'll love it. I'm like, yeah. And I'm listening to it. I hear Cthulhu Awaken. I'm like, come on. You did 3 Cthulhu songs. There are other things you could be doing, guys. But, sorry, that still bugs me to this day. But moving on, Cradle of Filth has so many Lovecraft songs. Cthulhu Dawn, Mother of Abomination, both are songs about Cthulhu. They talk about Arlia, Arle, Relay, however you want to say it in one of their songs. I think the song is called English Fire. They say at the rustling shores of Arlia. They say Arlia, so that's how I pronounce it. We're going to get into Cradle of Filth and Lovecraft. That needs its own episode, so we're not going to get too deep into that. Next, Morbid Angel. Morbid Angel has a song called Angel of Disease, which mentions Shub-Niggurath. And again, we're going to be careful about how we say that name. And the Goat with 1,000 Youngs. And another line, Cthulhu Waits in the Void, which is probably the most accurate representation of Cthulhu in any media outside of the books. Cthulhu Waits in the Void, Ancient Ones rule once more. Boom. Lovecraft. And probably I could go on all day about death metal and Lovecraft because he is everywhere in it. Two more I want to mention. Cephalic Carnage, Abraxas of Filth, directly about Cthulhu. Just, oh my god, brilliant song, that one. If you're not into progressive rock and metal, it may just, blow your mind, which is perfect because that's what Cthulhu does. And the other one I want to mention is a band called, oh, god dang it.
Future Hatter here. The band is called Bal Sagoth, and I couldn't remember it. In a minute, I'm going to tell you that I can't pronounce it. That was a lie. I just couldn't remember it. I'm sorry.
There's another song called The Chain to the Trillathon of Cthulhu. You can look that up. I can't pronounce the name of the artist, but that one's a little sillier. It's more on the fun horror side. Like, you got like spoken word parts done in this really cheesy, deep voice. It's a more fun song, whereas Abraxas of Filth is a more, actually Lovecraft song. But yeah, those are the few Cliff's Notes version. Those are the few I wanted to mention. We'll move on.
All right, and listeners, so I gave Hatter something he would enjoy. Let him do something that brought him a little bit of happiness. And now I'm going to take that all away from him as we're going to discuss a video game that is a dating sim called Sucker for Love, where in the original one, you actually date a waifu Cthulhu.
I would like to take my headphones off, but then I won't know when you're done talking about this.
And you're not allowed to, Hatter. You have to suffer through this. And of course, listeners, if you're not familiar with the game, it's called Sucker for Love. And the entire premise is that you have summoned Cthulhu so that you can kiss them, and that they are this waifu-ified female Cthulhu. And while it is utterly ridiculous, it's a dating sim, and you're trying to get Cthulhu to kiss you, which is represented with the whole tentacles and everything. A cutified version, but still. And one of the very interesting things about this is that in a way, it's not a bad representation of Cthulhu, because it is very clearly stated that your character's perception of being in your apartment, talking to this waifu Cthulhu and having this little date with them is happening while the world is being destroyed around you. There's horror outside, including at one point you look out the window and Cthulhu puts their hand on your head and tilts it back in and tell you, no, you don't want to look out there. Don't think about that. And one of the things being that if this entire ritual goes through the way it's supposed to, Cthulhu will awaken and all of reality will cease. Now, this is them mixing Cthulhu with Azathoth a little bit, but that is one of the things they do in this. And Cthulhu giving this entire speech about how, is that really so bad? Because once the dream is over, she will still always remember you fondly, but all dreams must end.
Yeah, so there was that. I think my pants actually got longer.
So, yes, there is a dating sim where you can date Cthulhu, and later you can date both a version of the King in Yellow, the Goat with 1,000 Young, basically all the Lovecraftian entities are available to date. It's weird as heck, but if that's your sort of thing and that's your sense of humor, it's actually totally worth a playthrough.
Yeah, so what do we have next on the list?
Nah, Hatter, I think we need to spend some more time on this. I think you need to be punished for some reason. Don't ask me why. But guys, we want to punish Hatter, right? Okay, all right. We'll let him off this time. We'll move along.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're planning on putting up a Patreon soon. And we'll talk about this more in a short or something. But if we can get we'll make a little contest. If we get to a certain number, again, we'll put it in a short or something, what the number's going to be, on our Patreon. Maybe you could get me to play it.
Oh, absolutely. Guys, whenever we do this, whenever we set this up, you guys got to help me out here. I want to make Hatter play Sucker for Love. So you're definitely going to have to contribute here. We got to get up to whatever level we set. We got to make it because I want to torture this guy. So, okay. You got me all excited, Hatter. Let's move on.
Okay, so next we have Young Howard Lovecraft, some animated movies. I think you know a little bit more about that than I do.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm not that familiar with Young Howard Lovecraft, but Sharon is. Here, Sharon.
Okay. I will fully admit I am not entirely sure this was not a fever dream I didn't have at 2 a.m. when I had a cold, but it is a series of, I want to say, 3 movies that are very badly animated that have young Howard Lovecraft, whose father may or may not have gone insane and been locked away in an asylum, who is now going through these mythical worlds with a companion who is a kind of cutified version of Cthulhu and is trying to save the world from these different entities. And Cthulhu has like this sweet, innocent side, but when he starts to remember who he is, he starts turning evil again. And the whole thing is, as bad as it sounds, better than you think. And like I said, I'm not entirely sure it was actually real.
Like many things like that, of those old animated things, it's kind of weird how many of them seem like they might have been a fever dream. Also, isn't it weird how many kind of chibi Cthulhus we see, where it's these cutified little Cthulhus? Like, that's just a major plushie market right now.
Well, you're going to get me on a little rant here, and I'll try to keep it short, but I'm kind of sick of them cutifying scary things. Like, it was novel for a while, but now it's pretty much everything, and we're going to talk about that later down this list, and I think you already know what I'm talking about, but we'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, I'm kind of sick of cutified things. Like, make things scary again. Make scary again.
100%. Now, one thing I want to touch on briefly, and I don't know if Hatter may have a little more than I do, which is in World of Warcraft, they have an entity called Cthon. And Cthon is basically an old god. It's really not even Cthulhu. It's much more of an old god, but it's Cthulhu coded. Again, it's lots of tentacles. It's trying to end the entire world. So it's very coded that way without being as much of a direct interpretation. You have anything to add on that, Hatter?
Not a lot. It's just, yeah, there's a lot of Lovecraftian things in World of Warcraft. Like, if you look up the lore of World of Warcraft, there's these crazy 6 to 8 hour videos that are actually very good, very interesting. And most of the time when I'm playing World of Warcraft, I'm more worried about my rotation than anything else. But yeah, Cthulhu is essentially just that. It's a mixture of Cthulhu and the Outer Gods. Same idea. You defeat it, you get its gear.
And actually, this isn't even one we had planned, but it just occurred to me, and I just remembered it, that we definitely have to talk about super briefly. Hatter, have you ever played very much Magic the Gathering?
Back in the late 2000s, I did, and then the community kind of turned me off of it.
Do you remember the Eldrazi?
Yes, I do.
So for anyone who's not familiar with Magic the Gathering, it's a card game with a long, convoluted, ever-evolving story and lore, but the short version of the Eldrazi is they are these entities from outside of time and space. They are very much coded like the Elder Gods. They are one of the better interpretations of Elder Gods that I have seen. They tend to be kind of tentacly, but they also have the whole undefinable madness-inducing kind of situation. They also corrupt everything. So they weirdly are not a bad representation. For instance, one of the mechanics on the card is that whenever one of these creatures attacks, it just forces your opponent to destroy a whole bunch of their own cards. So weirdly, a pretty good interpretation of the Elder Gods. It just occurred to me as we were discussing World of Warcraft, I realized, oh my god, we can't leave out the Eldrazi because they're pretty good.
Oh yeah, and there's probably a heck of a lot more. Like, I still like the lore of Magic the Gathering, but again, without getting too into detail, and y'all probably already know what I mean, the community killed it for me. The community is just plain unpleasant. But yeah, no, good addition there. What have we got next?
So Rick and Morty, and with Rick and Morty, we're mostly talking about the visual representation of Cthulhu in the opening sequence of Rick and Morty. Although you could argue that there's a lot of touching on eldritch horror, sort of eldritch type entities show up a few times. There's definitely quite a few tentacles that show up. And I will say that there's a lot of the same vibe of like the whole uncaring universe and existential horror in Rick and Morty. So you could argue that that's maybe a little bit of it. But mostly we're bringing them up for the beginning sequence because we see a visual representation of the main characters running from Cthulhu.
I think the most Lovecraftian thing about Rick and Morty is Rick. But we'll talk more about that in another video. Just in the fact that he's basically unstoppable. Once you're up against him, you're pretty much doomed. And he is existential beyond all reason. But
oh my god, Charles Dexter Ward, Rick and Morty could 100% have the Diary of Charles Dexter Ward episode where Rick is trying to take over Morty's body. That would totally make sense. So yes, that is a connection where while they don't ever do an episode like that, it would be the Curious Case of Charles Dexter Ward, which is where someone's ancestor is trying to take over his body. And I could see that with Rick and Morty Absolutely, because that's the kind of person Rick is. So yeah, 100% could see that. So weird connection there.
Absolutely. So next on the list in the world of sci-fi, we have the greatest trilogy of all time, Mass Effect.
Which, of course, yes, totally agree. Mass Effect is a fantastic game. And the Reapers are a great example of kind of a representation of the Outer Gods because they are these machine entities that kind of created the all life in the universe, or sort of seeded it, quote unquote, and then are coming back to destroy it all. And they tend to be these mechanical squid creatures. And of course, you find out that it's because they were created by the Leviathans, which are biological giant space squids. So we kind of have a connection there.
Yeah, there's also a bit of Lovecraft, and like this is something that was taken out of Mass Effect that I really wish was there. It was kind of a cut explanation as to why they do that every 50,000 or so years, why they come and reap. And it was that when people started to master biotics and artificial intelligence technology, they get too powerful. Like it throws off the fundamental balance of the universe and can destroy it. So the idea was the Reapers come through and stop them from doing that. Now, that was taken out. That I'm actually kind of glad was taken out because that would give us no reason to have future Mass Effect games. And actually, EA is planning on using AI to make the next one. So sadly, that's not going to... Whatever. You know what? We're not going to get too deep into existential dread. Point is, Lovecraftian stuff, cut content.
Absolutely. Another one we want to mention, because actually kind of keeping in the theme of a lot of times, giant space squid becomes the interpretation of Cthulhu and the outer gods. Elder things, outer gods, although the elder things are technically different. We talked about that in the last episode. You can reference our last episode if you want more of that. We have Hellboy, where there is kind of a brief representation that the evil outer god demonic entities that want to use Hellboy to come into our world are kind of giant space squids. So that's more of just an, oh, by the way, that yes, whenever they want an evil eldritch god, they make them giant space squid.
Yeah, it could be a little lazy sometimes, but we'll give Hellboy a pass because it's just such a great series of movies.
Oh,
Now,
and I do think they used them. And I do think they used them well, because I do love the thing of after his love interest dies and he whispers in her ear, and she comes back to life after he whispers in her ear, and they ask him what he said, and he says, I said, hey, you on the other side, send her back or I'm going to get her. And so they send her back. So I love that. So yeah, as you said, Hellboy gets a pass just because Hellboy's awesome.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, next we have something on the list that, again, I'm unfamiliar with. Monster Hunter International, which apparently has nothing to do with the Monster Hunter games.
No, this has nothing to do with the Monster Hunter video games. This is a book series by an author named Larry Correia. And it's essentially an urban fantasy where we have people who pursue government bounties on all sorts of monsters, from vampires and werewolves and zombies and chupacabras and things like that. It's actually very good, very funny. Very big if you are a firearms enthusiast. The author is very interested in firearms and goes into a great detail about what firearms are being used. That's just one of his big gimmicks. That's just one of his favorite things. The way in which it is very relevant is that they literally fight great old ones. The great old ones are one of the main antagonists. They come up continuously throughout the series. They are generally represented as sky squids, but they do at least give the reason that that's just kind of the closest thing to what we're able to understand. And they do at least lean into the eldritch horror of it, such as that they will eat you and consume you and digest you over 10,000 years or whatever. So they do. And of course, they have a few things, like they do have in one of the books, they have a creature who is trying to erect this giant living abominable tree that will cast all the world into darkness, which also has a very Lovecraftian feel to it. So they definitely play a lot with the elder gods, outer gods, all that kind of stuff.
You said erect. But next on the list, which this may be somebody's thing, Mind Flayers. We all know Mind Flayers, right?
Yes, Mind Flayers, the Ithilid, the Mind Flayers, the entities from D&D. I love them. They are probably my favorite enemy from D&D, and I am so happy they made it into Baldur's Gate 3, because before they made it into Baldur's Gate 3, nobody knew what the hell they were, and now they're like everyone's favorite thing, so I love them.
Oh yeah, I've been a fan of Mind Flayers since probably when I started playing D&D in 2006. It's a cool idea outside of the normal fantasy stuff, because they're these alien creatures, Lovecraftian, outside of our reality, this, and that. They use psionics instead of magic, which is a really cool way to mix it up. But yeah, maybe we'll talk about D&D horror entities in a future episode. But other than that, and how they connect to Lovecraft, I don't have much more to say. Do you?
Basically, essentially the main way they connect to Lovecraft is the fact that they have squid heads. I mean, they definitely look like little miniature Cthulhus. They don't have the dragon wings, but they do have the face tentacles. Now they are their own horror and they have body horror, but I would say they probably even lean more into body horror than cosmic horror, because one of the scariest things about them is they will try to put an illithid tadpole into your brain, which will eat your brain and turn you into one of them. But again, that's really not Lovecraftian. That's more body horror. So yeah, mostly they're here for the tentacles, but they're just so cool. How to talk about it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Now, the last one we have on the Cthulhu list is, it had to be here because it's kind of silly. Again, Cthulhu.
And as we discussed in the previous episode, Cthulhu is a female Cthulhu. Sometimes I've heard referred to as his sister or his daughter or something like that. And it's a little bit of a silly concept, but it's there.
Yeah, just another example of people not getting the point. But that's kind of our grand finale on Cthulhu. Next, we have my personal favorite, Nyarlathotep. And Nyarlathotep, he's the god of 1,000 faces. All this stuff, shapeshifter, likes to cause trouble. We talked about a lot of it in the last episode, so we're going to go over it pretty quickly. Of course, we already know he is Randall Flagg, the Man in Black, all those guys in the Stephen King world.
Which is probably one of the coolest villains in the Stephen King world, which, of course, he first shows up in The Stand and then is in just everything after that. He is also canonically acknowledged to be Nyarlathotep. Now, I will make a brief comment on, I tend to say Nyarlathotep. That's my preferred way to pronounce it. I don't know if it's more correct. It's my preferred way, and it will tie in here in a second, because Nyarlathotep in the first book he shows up in is kind of implied to have Egyptian origins, and the suffix Hotep is something we see in Egyptian names, and it will be relevant to what I think is a minorly inspired character, but we'll get to that in just a second.
So next we have on the list, and we're going to glaze over this very quickly, there's an anime where he takes on the form of a schoolgirl and things happen. Moving on, what's next?
Also, everyone, let's remember that if we can get enough followers, I can probably somehow finagle that into making Hatter watch that anime. So keep that in mind. We can do this. But yes, we will skip over the anime. Actually, circling back, because I will say that any trickster can be envisioned as Nyarlathotep in some form, because he takes different forms and causes chaos. So we could definitely see Loki as having similar vibes and DNA. But one interesting kind of connection is in the mummy mythology and the mummy movies and all that kind of stuff. We have Imhotep, which in some ways has similar DNA to Nyarlathotep, and in some ways is based off kind of the same character type and may be somewhat related.
I'll tell you what, though, just to circle back to the anime, if we get to 666 subscribers here on YouTube, I will watch, I'm going to say 3 episodes. That's all I'm willing to give you.
Come on, guys. You got to work with us on this. 666 episodes. That's our goal. Let's do it.
But, yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about Nyarlathotep. Cthulhu's going to be the one we're going to see the most of. As I said, these ones are going to go kind of quick because they're not as often directly referenced. But we have Azathoth next on the list. And, yeah, and I know you had some notes on that.
Oh, which mostly just that Azathoth is probably one of the most misused, misrepresented entities in Lovecraft, and when we see him in other places, he's almost always mixed up with the other outer gods, with Cthulhu. He's just not very well represented, because to be fair, he's a very hard thing to represent. So just that when you do see him, he will be very hard to recognize.
The one place I can think of where we have something of a simulacrum of Azathoth that's done somewhat right, and it's kind of mixed with Yog-Sothoth as well, is Kaz in Bloodborne. And have you played Bloodborne, Gray? I think you know about it.
I'm aware of it. I haven't played a ton, so kind of give us the breakdown of who Kaz is and how he relates to the Bloodborne video game.
Well, Kaz, she, by the way, actually is gendered, is a she, is kind of the thing that created the universe and is omniscient of the universe. Kaz is, basically the dark Lovecraftian idea of God. Again, there's elements of Yog-Sothoth and elements of Azathoth mixed in. there's a lot of people who are worshiping Kaz, not realizing Kaz does not give a crap. And the few times when we've seen Kaz actually interact with humans in a meaningful way, it hasn't gone well, kind of like how Yog-Sothoth works. Like, for example, a character, Rom the Vacuous Spider, this was a scholar who she wanted power, and she kind of got turned into a mindless spider when she got it. So, yeah, you see how it is.
Absolutely. And that kind of covers both Yog-Sothoth, Azathoth, which again, once we get outside of the Lovecraft mythos, get very mixed together. Now, one I do want to mention that we see quite a bit of representation of is the Deep Ones.
Oh, yeah, there's an entire, in the DLC, you actually go to the fishing hamlet, which, come on, what do you think that is?
Oh, absolutely. That is incredibly Innsmouth coded. And pretty much anything with fish people or a mysterious town with fish-like qualities, we're definitely going to see that influence from the Deep Ones. Now, I will say we said we were going to mention other excellent Lovecraft video games. There is one called Sunken City. And in Sunken City, you're sort of a detective film noir where you're trying to solve this mystery in this town that is essentially Innsmouth. And you encounter a lot of Lovecraftian entities, including people who, in the words of the video game, have that Innsmouth look. So we definitely see Innsmouth type, Deep Ones type people in that video game.
Oh, yeah, and for sure, I guess you could say Kaz is also kind of Dagon, because I think that's who the fish people were worshipping, was Kaz. Bloodborne is, like 15 years old now? I think I could give the spoiler. Kaz is dead, and that's going to come in a moment, but we'll get to that. Oh, and before we continue into Deep Ones, there wasn't much more to say about Yog-Sothoth, but he is kind of mentioned, of course, in the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy as Yog-Saha, but there's not much more to say about that. Now, we were talking about Deep Ones, and in the Sunken City. There's also Dark Corners of the Earth, yet again. The very first part of the game takes place in Innsmouth, and it's you trying to escape. Not much more to say there.
Now, another place where, again, it's not a one-for-one, but is definitely inspired by the Deep Ones because, again, any fish people are definitely going to kind of have their DNA in the Deep Ones. And one of the first ones that I think of, again, we mentioned World of Warcraft a little while back and how it has so much connection to Lovecraft, and that's the Murlocs being the fish people that are, of course, one of the major races in World of Warcraft, and they definitely have a lot in common with the Deep Ones from Lovecraft.
Yeah, and the next one is one that you're going to know a little better than me, because it's another one I still need to watch, is The Shape of Water.
Ah, The Shape of Water, which is basically a lot like the Creature from the Black Lagoon, if the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or if the woman from the movie was totally into the Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I will say, Shape of Water, great film about being other. It's a fantastic Guillermo del Toro movie, really good. But I think probably the thing it's the most famous for is the fact that there is absolutely a sex scene between the female love interest and the fishman. And the fishman, literally, there is this entire scene where she describes his genitalia, including putting her hands together and describing like a pocket, and then like moving another hand through it to describe how something is ejected from his body. So yes, we find out way more about fishman genitalia than we ever wanted to know in that movie.
Well, isn't that a cloaca?
No, that is not a cloaca. A cloaca is...
You know what? Let's not talk about this. I don't think I want to know.
No, you want a TED Talk on cloaca? I can tell you. There's this entire thing on how this works.
You're going to say it anyway, aren't you?
No, okay, guys, we will not subject you to the entire cloaca discussion, and we will just move right along.
Yeah, probably a good idea. Anyway, we have the last thing I have on the list for these guys, and it's not even close to a one-for-one. They're not underwater creatures, but they are Lovecraftian, and they kind of remind me of the idea of Deep Ones or Elder Things. Somewhere at the beginning of the universe, there was a planet called Fundament, whereupon worm gods and ancient creatures existed. These ancient creatures went to war with each other. Fundament was a gas planet with floating solid masses on it, and a couple of people drilled to the center of it to make a deal with the worm god for great power. This is the Hive from Destiny, and I'm going to stop myself right here because the Hive really need their own episode. They're one of the coolest things in video game history. The Hive, love them. But yeah, honestly, we don't have time to go super deep into that here.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of keep moving along and get to Shoggoth. So Anyone, of course, who may not be familiar with Shoggoths, because they are a little bit more niche. As we're going along, we're going to be getting to more and more niche creatures, so that's why there's not as many representations. Shoggoths are essentially an amorphous blob that has lots of tentacles, lots of eyes, lots of mouths, and can kind of generate whatever limbs or orifices it might need at any given time. So they're present in a lot of stuff. So again, Hatter was going to talk about Dark Corners of the Earth because it has a lot of Lovecraftian stuff. So tell us how they fit into Dark Corners, Hatter.
Real quick, you mentioned that they have any orifice they need. Do Shoggoths have cloaca?
I imagine a Shoggoth could have a cloaca if they needed. Also, while I will still spare our listeners the TED Talk on cloaca, they kind of just anything that has a cloaca is kind of Cthulhu-y and Lovecraftian anyway, because that is a really weird orifice, guys. It's just I want to tell you about how fucked up this is in an orifice, but I'm not going to. We're going to move along.
If we get enough comments about it, we'll make a short video. But moving on, Dark Corners of the Earth, there's not much to say about Shoggoths. They show up, especially in the Innsmouth section. They got one down in the sewers that does work for them. They're highly acidic. You got to kind of find your way around it. Yeah, not much else to say.
And we're going to sort of speed run this next section with Shoggoths because pretty much anything with tentacle monsters could be said to have shared ancestry with pausing. Anything with tentacle monsters really could be said to share DNA with Shoggoths. So, of course, we have D&D. They have the gibbering mouths, which is actually not a terrible representation of Shoggoths. So that's pretty close. We have the tentacle monsters from Conan, which are very similar.
Yep. We have the Mist. There's all kinds of things like that with all kinds of crazy shifting limbs and organs and whatnot. Daleks, if you want to take a second to talk about that, because I don't know Doctor Who that well, and I know a lot of people like it.
Now, Daleks are weird in that they are an alien creature that hates anything that isn't themselves. They are essentially the embodiment of xenophobia, and they want to, and of course, that's why they scream exterminate, exterminate all the time. Exterminate, exterminate. Super cool villains. They mostly live inside these power armor suits. And inside the powered armor suit, they are this little tentacle monster. So, but in some ways, they're kind of like a Shoggoth. In some ways, they're like little tiny Cthulhu. They're just kind of squid-like. So mostly they're kind of connected in that way. And of course, whenever we're talking tentacle monsters, one of the things we can mention is from Lord of the Rings and the Watcher in the Water, which is the creature outside of Moria that attacks the party. Now, you can have a lot of debate over what inspired what, whether the Watcher in the Water came first or whether the Shoggoths and Lovecraft came first, because interesting fact, Lovecraft and Tolkien were contemporaries. They were born like right around the same time.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of like one of those Cleopatra was born closer to the moon landing ideas. Moving past that, we have Hastur, the King in Yellow, and now he's not going to have a terrible lot of interpretations.
No, I would say mostly just kind of two, really, that come to mind for me. Of course, listeners, if you're familiar with any other, let us know. One is the King in Yellow, Hastur, is almost one for one the Crimson King from Stephen King, because, of course, Stephen King drew a lot from Lovecraft.
Oh, yeah, he has. I was actually talking with some people over on the other app about what Hastur's power scale is, and my answer was very, very high, and more so than I thought, because I was doing research on it. Hastur has an ability called cosmic telekinesis, which is exactly what it sounds like. He has the ability to reach into other realities, control people's minds, manipulate fate, manipulate reality, and yeah, that's the Crimson King. The Crimson King has the ability to do this sitting in his chair in his office in whatever world he lives in. So almost one for one. And another one for one is the Hanged King from the SCP Foundation. If you don't know who that is, the Hanged King's tragedy is the book within a book from the King in Yellow. The character, the Hanged King, is Hastur, and it's all exactly the same idea. They just moved it into the SCP universe. And another fun story about that is the Scarlet King in the SCP universe is the Crimson King from the Stephen King universe. So they kind of have two interpretations of Hastur in their universe.
And just to make Hatter's day worse, I would like to point out that Hastur, the King in Yellow, is the Queen in Yellow in Sucker for Love and is also dateable.
Of course they are. Moving on.
Moving right along.
Okay, so the last thing we have in this layer is the Dunwich Horror. There's not much out there that would be a representation of it in other media. The Orphan of Kaz is the child of Kaz, and therefore, because Kaz also represents Yog-Sothoth, the Orphan of Kaz is the Dunwich Horror. So that's going to take us over into the abyss, the stuff that's really, really out there, and there's just not going to be a lot of it out there. Speed run, real quick, Hounds of Tindalos. We already talked about Metallica, Nemesis, and Resident Evil is a constant pursuer, kind of like them. And that's all I've got for that. I know Gray was really excited to talk about Night Gaunts, though.
Now, Night Gaunts are very interesting. One, because they literally came to Lovecraft in a dream. They are these sort of devil-looking black devil creatures with wings and tails and horns. Very scary looking. Because I wanted to mention a book called The Graveyard Book, which is a book by Neil Gaiman that is a really interesting book that is basically a retelling of the story of Mowgli from Jungle Book, but in a graveyard with ghosts and vampires and eldritch horrors and things like that. So it's really good. And in this book, we meet Night Gaunts, and it is specifically a creature that comes and helps him because he learns to speak Night Gaunt as a way to cry for help, as in the character who is a werewolf, who is basically their Baloo, teaches him to cry for help in multiple languages, one of them being Night Gaunts. And the Night Gaunts save him after he has been abducted by ghouls. And that's why I wanted to reference the book, because it also has ghouls, which are another Lovecraftian entity. And basically in this story, they are doing the job of the Banderlog, of the monkey people that abduct Mowgli. So he is abducted by ghouls and saved by Night Gaunts, which are both direct Lovecraftian reference.
Oh yeah, and just a couple of other things for Night Gaunts. Very quick, there's an RPG, turn-based RPG called Wild Arms. You fight one as a boss. It really doesn't go any deeper than that. Any nightmare creature in general is going to be similar to a Night Gaunt. And of course, I'm sorry, I need to mention it. The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy has a sequence where Billy is having a nightmare and he's being thrown around by black devil creatures. And yeah, come on, it's there.
Which is great because, again, they originally came from a dream that Lovecraft had, and he remembered the thing about them that made them so scary to him was just how uncaring and unfeeling they were. So having them be present in a Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy dream sequence is actually weirdly authentic to Night Gaunt.
But yeah, we were going to talk a bit about ghouls, but we kind of covered it already. Ghouls, they show up in the Graveyard Book. That's really, I mean, there are ghouls everywhere, but the ones that are kind of specifically Lovecraftian are the ones that are kind of specifically Lovecraftian show up in Graveyard Book and really not many other places. But we have one final entry with some pretty interesting ideas here. Yig, the snake god.
And one of the really interesting things about Yig, the snake god, is that in its own story, it is an inspiration for actual mythology, because it is an entity that is specifically said, which is, of course, this very evil entity, this evil snake god that has cults that worship it. And supposedly in this world, actual gods like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, which was worshipped by Mesoamericans, were a light reflection of the dark snake god Yig. They were inspired by him, but less evil. So I find that really fascinating that in his own story, he is represented in other stories. So that's one thing I find really interesting. Of course, Yig is shown directly in Conan, because Conan faces a lot of snake priests, very common thing, the Cult of Set kind of situation. We also have the Encrypted book series, which I will not go deeply into. It is a urban fantasy story about people who deal with cryptids and other urban fantasy type monsters, and they end up facing a snake cult on multiple occasions. So pretty much anytime when you have people facing a cult that worships snake gods, we're going directly back to Yig.
And of course, the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy had Schnissiga, which is a snake cult, or they call themselves the Secret Snake Club, I believe it was. Same idea. They're trying to summon Schnissiga to destroy their bullies, and when the guy appears, when the god appears, it's just a tiny snake that talks like Woody Allen, saying, "What are you, crazy? I'm supposed to kill those guys? What's wrong with you? You're crazy." It was probably one of the best misdirections I've ever seen. And I
think you wanted to mention a parallel in Destiny.
Yeah, this one I kind of saved for last because I'm not sure it's directly a snake god. It's a little more complicated than that. It kind of really applies to just about anything Lovecraftian. But there are these ancient beings that live out in space outside of reality. You were already there, called Ahamkara. And a lot of the people in that universe call them wish dragons, which now we're going into Akira Toriyama's area. But they're not actually dragons. They're like these amorphous beings that take on a form when people have an idea of what they are. So they take on the form of what people believe they are. This kind of goes into the dreamland stuff. From Lovecraft, and I won't go too deep into it. But oh my god, we kind of have to do a whole episode on Destiny. That lore is so friggin' good. And Ahamkara and the Dreamlands, yeah, there's a lot of Lovecraft parallels in that part of it. But we won't go too deep into that. We'll save that for another episode.
Absolutely. And kind of as a final honorable mention almost, I just want to mention the entire World of Darkness mythology. So many things in World of Darkness tie either partially or directly back to creatures from Lovecraft. So we have the worm from the Werewolf the Apocalypse, which of course they have, which is one of the three major forces of the universe, the Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm. The Worm is a force of destruction, very Lovecraftian. They have in the Mage books, they have the elder entities, the reality errors, the types of creatures that want to destroy the world and have their own mages that work for them. So the Nephilim are a thing. So we have a ton of Lovecraftian vibes and references in World of Darkness.
Should we do a World of Darkness episode at some point?
Absolutely. Oh my God, there's so much horror in World of Darkness, including most of the games are at least partially horror games. We could talk about the horror elements on that for a whole episode. So I'd be totally down with that. That would be amazing.
All right. Well, we'll work on that at some point. But I think we've gotten to about to the end of Lovecraft and other media. Did you have anything else to add, Gray?
No, I think that's it. Other than we went in this episode mostly into the actual appearances of the creatures. Now, we could and are going to do an episode more on how the themes of Lovecraft and cosmic horror influenced other fiction, like, for instance, very famously, Stephen King. So this was more about the creatures directly. We can say a lot more about the other influences that Lovecraft might have had on other fiction.
And we definitely will. But for now, I'm Hatter.
And I'm Gray, and this has been Liminal Radio, the station between stations. Thank you for joining us.
Little bonus footage for you. This is what it might actually sound like if a human tried to pronounce a Lovecraftian being's name.